Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Most Accurate Podcast. I am your host, Addison Hayes, joined as always by one of the most accurate fantasy rankers in the entire fantasy football community, John Paulson. John, how are we doing on this fine Week 14 morning?
Week 14, it's an interesting week. Most leagues, it's the last week of the regular season, I would think. I think in most leagues. So it could be very crucially important for some managers. It could be 1 seeds are locked up, 2 seeds are locked up, or whatever, and it doesn't really matter. But we've got 4 teams on bye, so it's a good time to talk sneaky starts.
I was talking to my buddy a night or two ago, and he does play in a league, and he was complaining about it to me because he's like, I didn't realize this whenever I joined. They do the whole 2-week matchup things in the playoffs. So his playoffs start this week, and they run 14-15 for matchup 1 and then 16-17 for matchup 2. He's like, why do people do this? This is so dumb. So there are some people out there that are in playoffs if they run a format like that. Or if this is the very important week, as you mentioned, of the last week, some people are winning in. Some people are winning in and they don't have Christian McCaffrey. They don't have George Kittle. They don't have Drake May. So we've got some holes to fill for sure this week with this Week 14 bye week situation for some of these teams. So Week 14 sneaky starts then. We got 2 players at all 4 positions for a total of 8 of sneaky starts that we believe are good bets to outproduce their projections this week. Not guys that you immediately have to throw into your lineup if you have better options, but players that we believe can have a very good opportunity to produce some sneaky fantasy production this week. So at the quarterback position, John, why don't you kick us off here with your quarterback sneaky start for Week 14?
Yeah, I'm going to run it back with Jordan Love. Toyotathon is on officially after the sneaky start I picked last week. Jordan Love at Detroit. I thought that they would need him a little bit more in that one. And 234 yards, 4 touchdowns, breaking the hearts of Lions fans everywhere, and officially ushering in Toyotathon. Per PFF, Love has the top passing grade in the NFL, 91.9, 4,005 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, and 1 interception during Toyota's annual sales event. He has a leading 31 deep completions. Yes, this is silly, but I think there might be something to it. Not so much that it's Toyotathon, but that Love tends to play better late in the year. And this is an interesting game with the Bears because they're winning a lot of close games. Some of the metrics aren't so great with them, but they're in first place. It's I think with the Packers this year, you can see when they kind of take their foot off the gas, they just falter and mess around with teams and end up losing close ones. It's happened multiple times. But I think this one, they're going to be hyper-focused on this, and I don't think that they're going to mess around too much. The Bears defense has allowed an average of 235 yards passing, 2 touchdowns per game this season. They have picked off a lot of passes, but Jordan Love has not thrown many. So I'm interested to see interceptions. So I don't know. I'm interested to see how this works out with Love versus this opportunistic defense. We might get Jaden Reed back. Christian Watson is playing great. And Dontavian Wicks is coming off of a great game. So I think there's plenty of weapons here. This may end up being kind of a slower scoring game. Just depends on how the Packers defense does against the Chicago Bears offense. But the Chicago Bears running game is on fire right now. So I'm a little worried about that as a Packer fan. Ultimately, I think this will be a fairly high scoring game with Love having, 2 touchdowns, maybe 220, 230 yards passing.
Yeah, I think the note of Jaden Reed's, I'll say potential return, but it's sounding like it's leaning towards a probable return this week. Not that I'm saying that we should start Jaden Reed immediately. He's not that type of wide receiver that you just throw back into your lineup in first week back from a multi-month absence. But that doesn't mean that it's not a good thing for Jordan Love as well, especially whenever we haven't had Tucker Kraft for a few weeks and won't for the rest of the season. So he had a stretch there where he was kind of devoid of talent around him, and it seems like that talent is starting to come back and get healthy where it can get healthy. And with his recent production, I don't know how you don't continue just to kind of ride the flames, especially against Chicago's defense. So I like that start a lot with Jordan Love. My sneaky start, I didn't think I would ever say his name in a positive light this year. Was not a huge fan of him coming out of college, but it is Tyler Shough, the rookie quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. Over the last 3 weeks, he has posted stat lines of 282 and 2, 243 yards. He didn't throw a touchdown in that game, and then 239 and 2 last week. It is mainly on volume. It's very similar to Spencer Rattler's production early at the beginning of the year, where Rattler was just kind of getting it done good enough for fantasy and for his weapons, just because of the sheer amount of pass attempts that they've thrown. And that's pretty similar for Tyler Shough, who I believe has thrown 80 pass attempts somewhere in around there over the last 2 weeks. I think it was 38 and 43. So 81 pass attempts over the past 2 weeks for Tyler Shough. So it's all volume, but it's what he's given us, and it's what I expect to continue for the remainder of the year, or at least this week, against a Buccaneers defense. They're 24th in adjusted fantasy points allowed. And over the past 4 weeks, they've allowed 4 straight 270 plus yard games and 2 plus touchdown games to opposing quarterbacks. Shough did play Tampa earlier in the year. It was actually the week that New Orleans swapped off of Rattler over to Tyler Shough, and they both played basically 50% of that game. They combined for 250 passing yards, but they didn't throw a touchdown between Rattler and Shough. So if that's kind of where we're in again for the yardage, like how he has been for the past couple of weeks, but then maybe you get another touchdown or two. Tyler Shough, I think, is like the ultimate sneaky start waiver wire kind of guy, especially if you've lost Drake May or anybody due to a bye week.
Yeah, you'd have to be down bad to get that low in the rankings, but I did include him in a little paragraph here. I said that Tua Tagovailoa against the Jets, 25th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. Tyrod Taylor against Miami, JJ McCarthy against Washington, and Tyler Shough against Tampa. They're not official sneaky starts, but in 2 quarterback leagues, super flex formats, I think they're viable QB2s. And I think if you're really down bad at quarterback, he's not a bad guy to roll out there, because you think the Bucs will probably jump out in that one. It'll be a negative game script, and they're pretty bad against the pass. The Bucs are. So,
yep, I didn't like it, but I decided to roll with it. So I guess we'll see what happens. At the tight end position, John, why don't you start us off here with your sneaky start for Week 14 at the tight end?
Yeah, I thought about plugging Colby Parkinson. He's been pretty good the last few weeks, but I'm going to go with Brenton Strange against Indianapolis, 27th adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. He's got 2 games since returning from injury, 5 for 93 and 3 for 45 and a touchdown on just 9 total targets, but he's been efficient, if not a voluminous type player. He's averaged 5.3 targets per game this season, which is borderline tight end 1 volume. Indianapolis, 6.6 receptions, 72 yards, 0.42 touchdowns allowed to the position this season. Strange is he's involved, and I think Parker Washington's probably going to be out this week. So you've got Brian Thomas, we've got Jakobi Meyers, we've got Brenton Strange. I think that's how the passing offense is going to work this week.
Yep, I like it a lot, especially with his return from injury. I think a lot of people were very interested to see if he could kind of climb back into that every week starter tight end spot that he looked like he was going to work his way into at the beginning of the year. Then he got hurt. So seeing that production last week, hopefully maintains that with the Indianapolis Colts this week. It should be, I think, a pretty solid game for Brenton Strange. Again, especially we don't have George Kittle this week. Don't have Hunter Henry as a possible option. So you might need a guy like Brenton Strange. And he should be available out there for a lot of people on waiver wire still. My sneaky start at the tight end position, I really hate to do this. I feel like, the definition of insanity is just continuing to do something over and over again and expecting a different result. But it's Kyle Pitts. And he gets the Seattle Seahawks defense, it's not like an amazing matchup. They are 19th in adjusted fantasy points allowed right now. But this is more of a play that Kirk Cousins has somewhat of a connection with Kyle Pitts. In 3 Kirk Cousins games this year, Pitts has posted lines of 9 for 59, 2 for 25, and then 7 for 82 last week. And then you look at the Seattle Seahawks in terms of what they've done against tight ends recently. Again, they're not a fantastic matchup because they don't really allow a whole lot of touchdowns. But Hawkinson had 6 for 59 last week. Gunnar Helm had 6 for 51 in the same game that Chigakonko had 3 for 40. Colby Parkinson, as you just mentioned, he only had 2 for 14, but did find the end zone. Trey McBride absolutely demolished them. Dalton Schultz went 9 for 98. So like Cade Otton had 4 for 81. So there's opportunity here for a tight end to have production against Seattle. And whether or not Drake London does come back or not, that doesn't really impact it a ton. I think I would prefer Drake London to not be there just because that should funnel more targets his way. But even if he is out there, I don't know how effective he's going to be in his first week back, especially against a pretty solid Seahawks secondary. So I think it's going to be a lot more of a funneling to the over-the-middle passes. Maybe that's where Kyle Pitts can kind of volume his way again into a solid kind of more PPR output. And if he finds the end zone, that would be tremendous. I still think he's only found the end zone once this year. I could be wrong, but I mean, the dude is allergic to touchdowns. But if we get one this week, that's really good.
Yeah, I don't know that it's definition of insanity because he does have the 9 for 59 and the 7 for 82 in the last 3 weeks. So there is production that's happening. It's not like we're just holding, leaving a light on for him and he never delivers anything. We're not getting the big games because Atlanta's going to have a tough time scoring touchdowns right now, given the makeup of the offense. And if they do score them, it's probably going to be Bijan Robinson or Tyler Algier through the running game. They're not really trusting Cousins down in the red zone as much. So, as of right now, I think that Drake London probably will sit again. Was a DNP on Wednesday. We'll see what he does today, but not holding out much hope that he's going to be back. If he is, I do think that affects Pitts negatively. He's an interesting guy because, I see in the consensus rankings, he's a tight end 5 right now. But there's just guys that I feel way more confident are going to score a touchdown, like right below him. Even Brenton Strange, who doesn't have many touchdowns, seems more likely that the Jaguars are going to score touchdowns. Ferguson with Dallas, Mark Andrews, Baltimore, Gadsden even. So Zach Ertz. But if you're in a PPR league, I think Pitts is certainly viable given the makeup of this offense right now.
Tight end 5 is crazy. I didn't expect him to be that high. Holy crap. Like, I feel like most people will go, Mark Andrews gets a good matchup against Pittsburgh, as you mentioned. I mean, even Harold Fannin against the Titans, like, his is not a terrible. Anyway, I'm just surprised that Kyle Pitts is that high. But so maybe it's not as sneaky, but nobody ever feels good about having Kyle Pitts in your starting lineup. So hopefully I can inject a little bit of confidence into that play this week, especially again, if you don't have somebody like George Kittle and you just need a good tight end start, that could be Kyle Pitts. So let's move on to the running back position then. I really like your name here that you've got. So why don't you kick us off with your week 14 running back sneaky start?
I would say this week is not like a great week for running back sneaky starts. The guys that you sort of have that, not big name recognition, don't really have good matchups. So it's more about just trying to find somebody that's going to get you some touches and maybe falls in the end zone. I'm going with Devin Neal. He handled 17 of the team's 22 backfield touches last week. I did look it up. They didn't really have any, goal line carries or anything. I think that's probably going to end up going to Taysom Hill. So, that sort of caps Neal's upside, but, perhaps he gets a goal line carry. I don't know. But the Buccaneers have allowed an average of 134 total yards, 1 touchdown to opposing backfields this season, including 4.8 catches for 57 yards and 0.33 touchdowns to opposing running backs. They've been, pretty susceptible to the dump offs, and Neal did have, I think, 3 catches last week. So he ended up with, I think, around 10 fantasy points PPR. He ran 33 routes on Tyler Shough's 48 dropbacks. So I think there is some reception equity here. Maybe he gets 10 to 13 carries for 40 or 50 yards, and then, adds another 30 or 40 as a receiver. That would be a really good game for him.
I'm really glad that we're able to talk about Devin Neal. He was one of my kind of sleeper running back rookies coming out of college this year. Then, ended up having that day 3 draft capital where I thought maybe he could overcome Kendre Miller. That didn't actually end up happening until Miller got hurt again. And now now we're here with Devin Neal as the backup option to Alvin Kamara. Now that Alvin Kamara is out, we're able to talk about Devin Neal, and I love it a lot because I do think that he is a pretty good player. It's just not the greatest of situations right now, but they do run a lot of plays. He does have target equity, as you mentioned. I do think that Devin Neal is a pretty solid running back start this week if you needed a guy like that. Again, no Christian McCaffrey, no Travion Henderson. Don't even have, apparently, the Patriots RB1 and Ramondre Stevenson again. Other names like that. So if you're down at the running back position and you were able to pick up Devin Neal, I think he's a pretty solid start. So I also found similar struggles with the running back position this week. So I went a little bit deeper with a guy that is probably on waiver wires, or maybe it had gotten picked up this week because of the Kyren Williams injury news, but it's Blake Corum, running back for the LA Rams, who gets the Arizona Cardinals. Again, the Cardinals, not a fantastic matchup. They're 17th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position, which is, it's average. It's not scary, but it's not like it's phenomenal. But Blake Corum, I mean, he had 7 for 81 and 1 last week against the Carolina Panthers. Then 7 for 24, 8 for 10. So he wasn't all that involved the previous 2 weeks. But then 13 for 56, 13 for 58, and 12 for 37 were the 3 weeks prior, basically from the beginning of November there, or a little bit at the end of October into the beginning of November. So he has this opportunity to kind of have games, especially when the Rams are up a lot, to get volume as kind of the, let's sit Kyren Williams and give him some rest, and we'll run Blake Corum, who isn't fundamentally all that much different than Kyren Williams. And now that Kyren Williams is hurt, we're getting these news blurbs that, the Rams really want to protect him. They want this split with Blake Corum to protect Kyren Williams for the NFL playoffs. Like, that wording to me makes it sound like they're going to be a little bit more hesitant to throw Kyren Williams out there a lot. And that might be very beneficial for Blake Corum, especially, as I mentioned, in games where the Rams can be up a lot. The Cardinals are not a team that is, even with Jakobi Brissett, they have a lot of production, but they're not a team that's really putting up like a whole ton of fantasy or a whole ton of actual points on NFL defenses to where they're like highly competitive in games. And off the Rams loss last week, I think the Rams could be pretty scary this week. So I think Blake Corum could have a pretty solid game against the Arizona Cardinals this week as like the ultimate, man, I really don't have a better option because I lost Christian McCaffrey or I have other injuries. And you can pick him up off of waiver wires and just hope for the end zone, hope for extra carries, 50, 60 yards. That could be Blake Corum this week.
Yeah, I think the injury plus the language of protecting him for the playoffs certainly points to more of a 50-50 split this week, or 55-45 as opposed to like the 65-35, 60-40 splits that we've been seeing the last few weeks. And this is also one where the Cardinals have a tendency to stay in games. Like, they're at least, because they're firing, I mean, Jakobi Brissett's averaging 43 pass attempts per game. So they're still in games towards the end, and so that to me doesn't necessarily spell, big game for Corum. But if he's running pretty well and Kyren Williams is dinged up, then it wouldn't be shocking if Corum ended up with more touches than Kyren Williams this week.
Yeah, look at they played Seattle. The Cardinals played Seattle in Week 10. They lost 44-22 in that game. Kenneth Walker had 14 for 67 and a 3-yard catch, and Charbonnet had 14 for 83 and 1. So they, there's your example of a other kind of similar backfield split in a game where the Cardinals kind of got blown out, and both players, even though Walker didn't find the end zone, wasn't like a tremendous fantasy performance, but they both produced well for NFL standards. So if Corum doesn't find the end zone, he's probably not a tremendous producer this week, but I still feel like there's solid odds, especially if Kyren Williams is being set, that Blake Corum can find the end zone again this week like he did last week. But let's move on to the wide receiver position. And John, why don't you segue us nicely into your wide receiver sneaky start for the week?
Yeah, there's quite a few actual wide receiver sneaky starts that are intriguing this week, and we're going to stick with the same game with Michael Wilson. Marvin Harrison has some sort of heel injury. They put in some sort of insert late in the game, but I don't think he returned. He hasn't practiced yet as of Thursday morning. And right now, I don't think he's going to play, but we'll see. If he's back, then this is, Michael Wilson is not as intriguing. He'll be ranked lower because Harrison came back last week and got the lion's share of the targets, but Wilson still saw 7 targets last week, if I remember correctly. And then prior to that, of course, with Harrison out, 15 for 185 on 18 targets, 10 for 118 on 15 targets against the 49ers and the Jaguars, respectively. So, I mean, the Rams have a pretty tough rush defense. I don't, Zonovan Knight, Bam Knight's not going to tear him up on the ground. Like I mentioned earlier, Brissett's averaging 43 pass attempts in his 6 or 7 starts that he's got. The Rams have allowed an average of 12 catches for 147 yards, 0.75 touchdowns to opposing receivers. Greg Dortch is also like dinged up with a chest injury. This is could just be Trey McBride and Michael Wilson this week in the passing game for the Cardinals.
Do you have a extra shout out player in case Marvin Harrison plays that you want to maybe throw out there for anybody else? Just like you're making your final, Marvin Harrison is active this week. Maybe I don't want to play Michael Wilson.
Yeah, I would say if Harrison practices today, I would run Isaac Tesla out there maybe, or Tesla, whatever his name is, with Amon-Ra St. Brown. If he's sidelined, I did add him to the projections today. This might be a little tough because it's Thursday game, but then, I think Adonai Mitchell is intriguing against the Dolphins, given what he did last week, and Tyrod Taylor at quarterback, a competent passer with the Jets. And Devon Vele had a good game last week against Tampa. Again, I don't know if he played last week, but he's got Tampa this week, 20th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position. They had Miami last week, 8 for 93 and a touchdown on 8 targets. This is a very short history of production here from him, but it does seem like, they traded for him and they're starting to use him and they want to see what he has.
I like both those names a lot for sure. If Marv is actually active and you don't feel like playing Michael Wilson, you can run with those other guys. My wide receiver sneaky start is a name that I should have apparently been paying more attention to because I haven't realized what he's actually been doing since he got traded. It's Jakobi Meyers, traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars, a few weeks ago. First game at 3 for 41. That was his first game with the Jaguars, also against the Houston Texans. So, didn't really expect all that much against that defense. 5 for 64 then, and then 4 for 50 and 1, 6 for 90 and 1 last week against the Tennessee Titans. And now this week gets the Indianapolis Colts, who are 28th in adjusted fantasy points allowed. They are really bad against the tight end position. That's why you highlighted Brenton Strange, but they're also really bad against the wide receiver position too. Just recently they've given up 5 for 98 to Nico Collins. They gave up 8 for 141 to Rashee Rice, 6 for 104 and 1 to Drake London. Those are just in the last 3 games that the Colts have actually played. 7 for 93 to Chimere Dike a couple weeks before that. 11 for 119 and 1 to Keenan Allen, while also allowing a touchdown to Quentin Johnston. The Colts are not a tremendous pass defense still, and we have Sauce Gardner banged up as well. So not that I think Sauce is going to be on Jakobi Meyers as more of a slot receiver, but he has had pretty good production since being moved over to the Jaguars, finding a connection with Trevor Lawrence. And I also think that the Colts, they can keep Etienne and Bashal Tutin in check a little bit, and that might force the Jaguars to have to throw even more, especially if Indian is able to score on the Jaguars' defense, which is also not that great against the pass as well. So Daniel Jones is a pretty solid start too in all of his pass catchers. So I think in what could be low-key kind of a shootout matchup, I think Jakobi Meyers is a pretty sneaky start this week if he held on to him or if somebody dropped him and then picked him up after he got moved to the Jaguars. I think he's sneaky for sure.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, Parker Washington has a hip injury. He's looking doubtful, so I just think we're down to Myers, Thomas, and Brenton Strange probably. And I actually wrote up both Myers and Thomas for sneaky starts, and I have Myers ranked 19th at the position this week, just given the immediate impact that he's had. And it looks like Trevor Lawrence and him are on the same page, more so than him and or Lawrence and Thomas are on the same page so far. I mean, it's really kind of crazy. You would think that Meyers is the one that was here last year, in Jacksonville last year with the way that they're throwing. And you mentioned the Colts defense. They lead the league in pass attempts against. So it's primarily a volume issue. Their yards per attempt is fine at 7.0. And they are allowing the sixth most passing yards against. And a lot of that is teams fall behind. They've had a good year. But that's fine. We don't care how these fantasy players get there as long as they get there.
Makes me think of what could have been with Travis Hunter had he not gotten injured. And they probably wouldn't have traded for Jakobi Meyers. And maybe this could have all been Travis Hunter production, but we will never know. But Meyers is producing well. And as you mentioned, don't really care how they get there as long as they get there. So I think Meyers could have a pretty solid week. So that's going to wrap things up for Week 14. Sneaky starts with Jordan Love, Tyler Shough, Brenton Strange, Kyle Pitts, Devin Neal, Blake Corum, Michael Wilson, and Jakobi Meyers, 2 guys at each of the positions. So we're going to move on to the Bleacher Nation fantasy card then, which is played on the Bleacher Nation fantasy app. If you are not familiar or have yet to sign up, it's a pick'em style game, very similar to Prize Picks or Underdog, where you just go through the entire slate of players and yardage and touchdowns and attempts and best or longest plays. Pick more or less, build out your card. You get a payout multiplier based on how many legs are in your card. Right now, they are running a 50% deposit match up to $250 with code SWISH. So that's a very good promotion as a first-time player to come in, sign up, deposit money, and you get that deposit match 50% up to $250 with code SWISH. They are running a promo leg as well for Caleb Williams more than half a passing yard on Sunday. So if you are a new user, you can throw that promo leg into the entire leg that you are building out. And, that gets added into your payout multiplier as well. Caleb Williams more than half a passing yard. So, John, why don't you hit us with the next leg of our Bleacher Nation fantasy card for the Week 14 Sunday slate?
Yeah, I just quickly started looking at the lines, to pick somebody for this. And I was looking at the Bills' rush defense. It's been bad all year. So I started looking at Chase Brown. I see his rushing yard line is 50.5. I also like that. But I'm going to go with the 74.5 rush and receiving yards, more than that. If you look at what Brown has done, I think the reason it's this low is because Samaje Perine is back, but I still think with Brown in the lead role, he's got a really good chance at beating that number. In the last 6 games, he's had 113, 130, 127, 112, 105, and 100. So in that span, he has crushed this line. And the reason I'm going with receiving and rushing is just in case the Bills jump out to a big lead and have some success early in the game defending the run. We still have a way for Chase Brown to get there in a garbage time or in catch up mode. I think 74.5. He could get that with just rushing. He could get that with just receiving, honestly, and against the Bills. So we shall see. But that line to me looks really good, given the 6 straight games that he's cleared that.
Yeah, one of the patterns that I've noticed with the Bills' rush defense is, especially whenever teams are able to actually keep up with the Bills offensively, that's when you also see, because it's neutral game strips, the team is able to maintain their rush attack, which doesn't happen all that much against the Buffalo Bills' offensive production. But with Cincy, with Joe Burrow back, Chase Brown, as you mentioned, I like the rushing and receiving because it gives you the outlets on both, both aspects and basically covers you in terms of all game scripts. So I like that call a lot there with the rushing and receiving yards. Mine is going to be Devon Achane more than 79.5 rushing yards. He's hit this in 3 straight games and has also hit this in 5 of his last 7, including 120 rushing yards in 4 of his last 7 games. He's been absolutely on fire. He is the bell cow for the Miami Dolphins, and now they get a New York Jets team that is also really bad against the running back position as well. Achane actually rushed for 99 yards and a touchdown on them earlier in the season, but then they also are just coming off of a game where Bijan had 23 for 142 and one. Judkins got 75 on them. Perine, as you just mentioned, 9 for 94 and one on this Jets defense, while Chase Brown also had 73 rushing yards. So I think it's going to be a very big day for Devon Achane. And for the fact that his line is only at essentially 80 or more yards, take the more on 79.5. And he should probably get there as he's done for 3 straight.
I like it. The Jets are averaging or allowing an average of 104 rushing yards to running backs. So he just needs to get about 80% of that. If they don't go over, they're probably going to beat that number anyway. And then he just needs to get his fair share.
Which he has. I mean, the dude's absolutely incredible. He's in one of the best first round picks that you could have made this year. So he should lead you right into a fantasy championship and money on the Bleacher Nation fantasy app. So that's going to close things down for this week's episode. And again, that card is the Caleb Williams more than half a passing yard promo for new users, Chase Brown more than 74.5 rushing and receiving, and Devon Achane more than 79.5 rushing. Don't forget that 50% deposit match up to $250 with code SWISH on the Bleacher Nation fantasy app that you can download on iOS or Google Play Store apps. So yeah, that's going to wrap things up for week 14. We appreciate everybody for listening, watching, tuning in, and we'll catch you guys next week for most of you, the first week of the fantasy playoffs with week 15 sneaky starts. So we will catch you guys then on the Most Accurate Podcast. Peace.